wonder what happens when lawmakers decide prayer is more powerful than policy? Let's head to Tennessee. Welcome back to Beyond the Bill Number, where we deep dive into legislations and all things interesting, wild, and sometimes downright strange that happens in our politics. Today, we're talking about Tennessee's new approach to tackling social issues through a resolution for prayer and fasting. Yep, you heard that right. In July of 2024, Tennesseans were encouraged to turn to the divine intervention. And today, I have Stephen here to break it all down. Hi, Stephen.
Indeed. Hi.
Are we really looking at legislation that brings prayer and fasting into the political arena? It really does seem like we are living in a weird time where all of these things that we really held as deeply foundational beliefs to the United States are kind of encroaching, and everyone's just like, we need religion in our politics now more than ever.
So, I mean, obviously there are a lot of facts involved in this. So let's sort of get into it. So, Tennessee's legislature then officially designated July this year as the month of prayer and fasting, and it was through Joint Resolution 803. So it wasn't a sort of a generic "let's all come together and talk to whatever gods we believe in" type of thing. It was an explicit call for citizens to seek God's blessing and mercy for everything from violence to human trafficking. So the usual kind of stuff that we typically hope lawmakers would tackle with policies, really. And worth noting that it was explicitly about Christianity. So there weren't mention of any other deities or any other religions. It was purely driven through the sort of Christian orthodoxy within the state.
Instead of, say, funding a rehab program or passing laws to tackle corruption or violence, they just decided that, prayer to a Christian God was the solution, what's the thought process here?
So Representative Monty Fritz, who sponsored the resolution, it was essentially saying in the resolution that they'd exhausted all other options. The financial and legislative incentives weren't working. They simply weren't able to come up with solutions for all the problems, which is quite a staggering thing for a legislator to sort of say, really, because that's their job, right? That's what they're elected to do. So they sort of figured, hey, let's sort of kick this one upstairs then, just like the founding fathers did, and say, let's see whether the Almighty has anything to say about fixing our problems.
Yeah, I guess it's a Hail Mary move, literally. Let's get into the meat of it. What about the constitutional issues here? I mean, the First Amendment seems pretty clear in the separation of church and state.
Absolutely, yes. So the First Amendment Establishment Clause definitely frowns upon the government endorsing any particular religion. I mean, it states Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. And then, of course, it goes on to say, and you shouldn't set one religion above any other either. It's very important to say that all religions should be respected, but that it shouldn't be an establishment. And that's why it's known as the Establishment Clause. But this resolution certainly doesn't shy away from that. It actually quotes Bible verses and calls on God's intervention. And as you can imagine, this has a few people feeling a little bit uneasy, really. So the Freedom from Religion Foundation basically threw up their hands and said, "Wow, this is way too churchy for government business." And they even called for the governor to rescind the whole thing. And in their statement, they used the phrase, "Governor Lee, you are not elected pastor in chief." Ouch.
That is a burn. But, Tennessee is a pretty religious state, right? It's kind of in an area here that we call the Bible Belt. And could this just be them reflecting their own demographics?
Oh, yeah, for sure. So Tennessee is definitely on the high end when it comes to religious affiliation. There was some research done by the Pew Research Center, which found that about 81% of adults in Tennessee identify as Christian. So it's well above the national average, and obviously much higher than you would find elsewhere. And evangelical Protestants make up sort of over half of that. So yeah, in many ways, this resolution is just speaking to the crowd. And that's fair enough, isn't it? People are allowed to follow their religion, and obviously they elect politicians that reflect that as well. And so, on one argument, you can say, well, it's perfectly fair then for the sort of politicians to actually try and harness this, if you like, harness the faith of people
Hmm.
to help make this state a better place. And you could say that's what they're doing, really. But let's not forget that the religious landscape, even in Tennessee, is shifting. So across the United States, religiosity generally is declining, and there are more people who don't particularly affiliate with religion, or particularly don't affiliate with organized religion. And so even in Tennessee, the percentage of these religiously unaffiliated folks has been steadily growing. So it's increased, according to the Pew Research, from 9% to 14% in just a few years.
Wow.
So this is a bit of an issue, I think, for this legislation. Not everyone in Tennessee is likely to respond to sort of state-sponsored Christian prayer.
It sounds like there's a fine line between representing the people and kind of imposing a particular belief system on them. 5% increases is a decent amount. And,
Mm.
with those 14% and growing numbers of people from non-Christian faiths, are they just kind of left out of this conversation? And is their prayer not worth it? Do they not want positive vibes sent to the legislator if they're not directed at God? Or
Exactly. I mean,
yeah.
it's obviously one of the biggest criticisms of this particular resolution. They are alienating anyone who isn't a Christian. It's not. A lot of people would say that they're Christian. They might not necessarily be like extremely devout or sort of going to church every week and really living the sort of the Christian life, as you say. And so, are you leaving these people out? Are they sort of being ignored, really?
Hmm.
And it's also like saying, well, we've got these issues in our state, we've got these particular issues, but only a specific religious solution is welcome. Only a specific religious view on this can actually help solve these problems. And you've got all these folks from non-Christian faiths, and their voices aren't being heard in this call for prayer and fasting. And then, of course, people who think that government should be focused on, actually governing rather than actually calling for prayer.
Imagine that. This resolution clearly has supporters, has critics. And I kind of want to talk about the practicality for a minute. When we look at religion and we look at addressing problems like this, I feel like this is a way for the government to say, to what that man said, hey, we can't do anything else. We have to turn to divine intervention, and kind of wiping their hands of the issues and saying that, you need to pray hard enough for these solutions to come. And that can't fix Tennessee's major problems of addiction, violence, human trafficking, all these things that they're talking about.
But if you are a person of faith, then I would suggest that you might see prayer as a way of sort of seeking guidance and strength to tackle these tough issues. And the resolution supporters do argue that it's about more than just asking for divine intervention. It is about self-reflection, coming together as a community to find solutions. And that's a good thing. I mean, prayer in its essence is a form of meditation. It helps sort of focus the mind and clear your mind. And if you do it together in particular, it's a way of building community. And then once you get a community together, they can come up with powerful solutions to problems as well. But of course, the skeptics here are saying, well, look, prayer is nice, but what about real action? And that is true. It's great to ask for blessings, but when it comes to fixing problems like addiction or violence, you need actual policies as well. So you need the funding for the rehab center. You need better mental health services, tougher gun laws. Of course, when it comes to gun laws, is one of the things where we often hear of thoughts and prayers, don't we? It doesn't seem to do much to stop that.
Right.
So the actual legislators need to work as well as calling
Yeah.
for prayer.
Yeah, exactly. And there's so much that only can be done from coming together, trying to build that community. And I think that is a really great point there of when we can come together as a community and see each other as people and see these problems as things that are impacting our day to day. I think that is a really wonderful sentiment and something that we definitely need in the US. I think that it's no secret here or in the UK or anywhere that, the nation is fracturing and we're not seeing each other as
Yeah.
communities and kind of coming together to fix these problems. But, there's only so much that can be done before you have to, get on your feet and and do something. And the people responsible for this are our legislators that have been elected and given these positions.
It's true. I mean, it does depend on your perspective, and obviously we have very different perspectives here than the Tennesseans who were sort of enacting and participating, obviously, in this month as well. And I'm sure that many of these Tennesseans were comforted and uplifted by the collective act of worship, and that's something, as we said, people coming together in common cause can be a very powerful force of good. But did it make a practical difference? Did they actually manage to come up with any new solutions? Well, probably not really. I mean, certainly for me, looking at this, I would have liked the resolution to have been more inclusive, to invite all faiths to participate. And I think that would have avoided, to a certain extent, that the sort of constitutional issues as well there, and set it much more clearly in context by talking about the actual policy as well. Saying, okay, we want you to pray and we want fasting and so on, but then we're also going to do all of these other things to help fix these problems.
Yeah. So good intentions, questionable constitutionality.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's one of those things that sounds very noble, but when you scratch the surface, it raises more questions than it answers, really. And at the end of the day, a month of prayer might help people feel better, but it's not going to fix Tennessee's deep-rooted problems on its own. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. You're going to need more than divine intervention.
That's it for today's episode of Beyond the Bill Number. Stephen, thanks for joining me.
Always a pleasure.
Don't forget to subscribe, and if there's any legislation that you're interested in us covering, comment below, and we'll catch you next time.